I was the first company, swimming pool company in the world that openly talked about pricing on their website. Just for my little company in Virginia, by talking about cost and price because of analytics, we use HubSpot.
Hmm.
We've done over 35 million in sales just for my one little from my Virginia location
Hmm.
from one article talking about cost and price. $35
Hmm.
million in sales from one article. Took me 45 minutes to write my kitchen table.
You're listening to RevOps Champions, a podcast created for B2B leaders to help you align your people, streamline your processes, trust your data, and leverage technology in order to grow your business. Welcome back. Today I'm joined by Marcus Sheridan, globally recognized speaker, author, and entrepreneur, best known for his books and frameworks around endless customers and They Ask, You Answer. His methodologies have reshaped how companies approach sales, marketing, and customer trust. We're going to talk about that a lot more today. Marcus's business learning journey began during the 2008 global financial crisis when his company, River Pools, was facing severe decline. In response, he shifted away from traditional marketing and began answering every customer question online, openly and honestly, including topics most companies avoid, like pricing, problems, and comparisons. This approach not only helped save his business, but evolved into a widely adopted framework for thousands of businesses to drive trust, pipeline, and revenue. Today, Marcus is a partner and co-founder at a variety of companies across multiple industries, including Price Guide, AI Trust Signals, Question First, Impact, and River Pools. What they all have in common is Marcus's passion for helping business leaders and their teams align marketing and sales around buyer education and trust. He's widely regarded for his practical, no-fluff approach to modern revenue growth. Marcus, welcome to the RevOps Champions podcast.
Yeah, Brendon, it's been too long. I'm so glad we get a chance to catch up. I got a feeling that the conversation today is going to be valuable to your audience. My promise, as always, is you'll have stuff to do. You'll have stuff to take away.
Yeah, I have no doubt. I was just thinking about it, Marcus. I mean, you and I go back a long way. I'm guessing probably 12 years. And in the early days, when we were both sort of HubSpot partners back in the early days, as HubSpot was still maturing as a platform, I learned a lot from you. You actually spoke at our Dynamicon in 2017, which seems like a lifetime ago, but I guess it is 9 years ago. And then, of course, your success has been really quite incredible, and you've gone off and started multiple businesses. We're still plodding away and doing our thing here, trying to help now. I guess where we've evolved to is increasingly helping franchise brands and multi-location organizations with the systems that drive their growth. So, but let's just go back to the beginning for a second, right? So you turned a struggling business during the '08 recession into a global framework. What was the turning point when you realized this approach was working?
Well, the beauty of downturns is we see a lot of innovation, and it's because companies are forced to innovate. Generally, most companies are always running on what I refer to as the pride cycle. And when everything is good, we tend to be less innovative and we don't do many of those little things that we should be doing to stand out. But when things are bad, that's when we turn it up and we start to say YOLO and we do some of those things that we should have done a long time ago. And it was during this period of time when I thought I was going to lose my company. We had nothing to lose. I started really learning about what was a novel concept at the time, which was inbound marketing, content marketing. And really all I heard in my simple pool guy mind was, Marcus, if you just obsess over your customers' questions, worries, fears, issues, concerns, and you're willing to address them online through text, through video, honestly and transparently. If you do that a lot more than anybody else, you do it well, you could save your business. And so that's what we did. And I didn't think it was very innovative at the time, Brendon, but we ended up becoming the most trafficked swimming pool website in the world. And just to give you context for that, that meant we were getting about 1 million visitors a month during the summertime for a pool company, little pool company in Virginia. And it led to us becoming, for the context of this conversation, the demand was so great, the traffic, the leads, et cetera, that we had to expand. Otherwise, we were just throwing so much potential revenue away. So we became a manufacturer in the 2016, 2017 time frame. And so that meant we were manufacturing fiberglass pool shells, and we started then getting dealers around the country. And we would go on to form the first franchise of fiberglass. We were the first fiberglass franchise for fiberglass pool companies in the world, and it's called river pools. And so in 2020, I sold the manufacturing side and the franchise side, but I'm still a franchisee of the company that I sold to.
Oh,
And of
interesting. I didn't
course,
know that.
yeah, and today I still, because of my different softwares and stuff, I'm working a lot with different franchisors around the globe and a multiplicity of industries. Still very involved with river pools. I'm going to be there next week teaching all the franchisees and the dealers as well. So
Awesome.
this is one of those things where, it's really much at this point it's in my blood, and a lot of the problems you talk about are problems that we're dealing with as well. Some of which we solve, of which we're trying to figure out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, of course, and I mean, I don't know the latest, and you could probably share with us, but I mean, your sort of the Liverpool's story, because when you go back to the sort of 2008, 2009, I mean, Liverpool's and Spas back in the day was essentially you were an installer locally of fiberglass pools, right?
Yeah, we were a
Whereas,
little
yeah,
Virginia company.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it was a small shop, but what was interesting is we became a digital David in the land of Goliath. I was because of what happened in terms of just the amount of trust, traffic, lead sales that we started to get. I was like the original influencer when it came to swimming pools.
hmm,
Except I don't like to call it influencers because influencers are essentially people that say, "Hey, look at me," whereas what I was saying was, "Hey, look at this." And my friend Daniel Priestley would call that a key person of influence. And I think that's
hmm,
actually what most businesses are trying to become
hmm,
is a key person or a key brand of influence where you're teaching the market and you're known as a thought leader in that market because you're constantly just giving them helpful information that they can apply to their life, apply to their business, whatever. A lot of companies have done that at this point, but most don't do it at the transparency level that is needed to really stand apart and drive the trust and ultimately drive the pipeline and revenue.
yeah. It's interesting, because I know you visited us a few times here in Minnesota. And whenever I think of that way of educating your audience, your customers in Minnesota, because Best Buy is based in Minnesota, people here will often use the Geek Squad analogy. And I always, when I think about it, I think of the Geek Squad analogy and the Marcus Sheridan River Fools analogy, because essentially what both of those businesses did and what so many others now, and I mean, unfortunately, not enough, but so many other businesses have started to do thanks to you and the sort of the Geek Squad model, which is just help your customers figure out as much as they can on their own, and then ultimately if they need more help or if they don't have the bandwidth or the skills to do it themselves, they'll call you or the Geek Squad to come in and help them, and that's how they drive their
Yeah, the
business.
issue is to do that, you've got to have an abundant mentality. And
Yeah.
frankly speaking, a lot of people come from a place of scarcity with their business. But yeah, like if I do this, and this has caused conflict for me and like multiple times over the years. When I get misaligned with someone, it's when they're coming from a place of scarcity. And I just don't think that way. It's not how I roll.
Hmm.
And it's not helpful. When it comes to the Geek Squad, somebody asked their CEO because the Geek Squad, in many ways, did their own form of they ask you answer, right?
Yeah.
They've
Yeah.
produced a lot of content to teach people how to fix their own stuff when it comes to their IT, their computer stuff. And somebody
Hmm.
asked the CEO one time, like, aren't you afraid that you're cutting off your nose to spite your face? And he said, don't you realize my number one customer is the person that tries to do it themselves? Now, see, that's somebody that gets it. I mean,
Hmm.
that's what it's supposed to look like. And, when you think abundantly, and this goes back to like to the one of the biggest things that people know me for is I've been teaching pricing, addressing the pricing subject and pricing transparency
Hmm.
for the better part of, 16 years now. I've been teaching about it online.
Yeah.
And, I was the first swimming pool company in the world that openly talked about pricing on their website. I was the first swimming pool manufacturer in the world that had a pricing estimator on their website, which everybody said you can't do with dealers and franchisees. I'm like, of course I can do it. Watch me do it. And
Hmm.
it's become a cash cow, for us.
Yeah.
Just for my little company in Virginia, by talking about cost and price because of analytics, we use HubSpot.
Hmm.
We've done over 35 million in sales just for my one little from my Virginia location
Hmm.
from one article talking about cost and price. $35
Hmm.
million dollars in sales from one article. Took me 45 minutes to write at my kitchen table.
Hmm.
So, I mean, what's wild is you still have the majority of companies refuse to talk about pricing whatsoever. And it's just really, really fascinating. If you ask a company, do you believe in the golden rule? They're like, yes. Do you believe in treating your customers as you yourself would want to be treated? Yes, absolutely. Would you appreciate it if somebody was willing to just at least address your question roughly, how much is this going to cost? Yeah, I would appreciate it. Okay, do you do that for your customers? Well, I mean, not exactly. So you're not following the golden rule at all. When I started, talking about they ask you answer, about 98% of companies were not addressing cost and price online for
Mhm.
B2B services. That was almost 100%. To this day, that number is still about 94%. I mean, most companies still don't address it. I don't count e-commerce in that mix. I mean, most companies still don't address cost and price, and they're really all going to be in serious trouble because I can tell you right now, based on what I've learned, just having a software company that has to do with AI and AI visibility, that you will be penalized in the very near future. You already are, but you're going to be significantly penalized if you're not willing to address the subject of pricing online. You're just going to get hit.
Mm. Which again comes back to, I mean, in fact, I still have I don't know how old this book is now, but this is where it kind of all came together for you. When I was in the room a couple of times when you were talking about this, like I said, 10 years ago, I was like, yeah, well, probably just it's going to be a matter of a few years and everyone's going to be doing this. And it's really interesting to hear you say that it's that the numbers really haven't improved all that much.
No, they haven't improved much, but there's getting ready to be a quantum leap, and I'm going to tell you why. And again, when I'm saying this, everyone, if you're listening, I've got data and I've got context points behind me. I've got one software company which is called Price Guide. It helps organizations quickly and cost effectively build pricing estimators for their website. I've got a bunch of franchisors that are using this for their franchisees. And I've got another software called AI Trust Signals. This measures the likelihood that AI is going to recommend you and why it wouldn't, and the things that you need to fix, right? So the
Hmm.
context that I share these things is just based on this. Like, this is a very much a world that I'm in. I've got a ton of data points on this, and one of the best indications that we see of where we're headed with this is recently Google came out with a new feature in search. When somebody does a near me search for a contractor, anything to do with home improvement, so like roofer near me,
Hmm.
now what you see at the top of the page is this little button that says online estimate. And so Google is funneling people that are searching for contractors near them. They're funneling them to their online estimate search tool.
Hmm.
And the reason for this is because they know the primary question that everyone has when they go on the buyer's journey, like the gateway to the buyer's journey is the question roughly, what am I going to spend? Like, can I afford this?
Hmm.
Questions like that. It's all the same
Hmm.
thing.
Yep.
And so because they see it's their job to give you the best, most specific, relevant answer to your question as quickly as possible. It's always what they've essentially like. That's always been their goal, and from a UX perspective. Well, they know that most people are wanting this, and so they came out with that. And so now Google is rewarding companies that have estimators on their website. We know this
Hmm.
as a fact. You can't argue with this.
Hmm.
And if they're built with the right schema, it will show as an online estimator, and Google will show it more in that feature. They also
Hmm.
have a new feature that they're testing right now. It's called Have AI Check Prices. And so what it does, somebody does, once again, it usually has to do with home improvement, home services right now. Okay. But
Yep.
this expands out. But the way things normally work is they start in B2C, usually with home improvement, home services, and automotive. Those are like the big three of where things start,
Hmm.
incubate, right?
Hmm.
And then they expand out to the rest of B2C. Then they go to B2C services as well. And then they expand to B2B. That's just how it goes. So anything that starts to happen in home improvement, usually you actually end up seeing it across the board.
Mm.
And so what we're now seeing is this have AI check prices feature within Google. Doesn't show it every time, but when you do a localized search for some type of home service, you'll see a button sometimes that says have AI check prices. And then what Google does, it asks you a few questions about the service you're looking for, and then Google goes out, their agent goes out, and they try to get the information, they ascertain it for, in this case, the homeowner, and then they bring it back to the homeowner and they send them an email a day or two later that says, here's what we found. Here's the answers we got for you. Here is the companies, therefore, that we're going to recommend. Okay. Now, this 100% is a precursor to agentic search. It doesn't take any brain power to say, oh, yes, I see where this is headed. And
Yep.
where we're essentially headed, Brendan, is within a pretty short period of time. And my estimation is really about 18 months. What's going to happen is, you remember how, like, at one point in your life, you weren't using a search engine. And then suddenly you realize search engines were possible. And the next thing you know, you were using a search engine every day, and everybody you knew was using a search engine every day. And then,
without even thinking about it.
without thinking about it, just became normal behavior.
Yeah.
And then the same became true for adoption with social media. And then the same became true with adoption with AI based search. Like quickly you're like, oh my gosh, there's this thing, anybody that has actually used AI based search, they quickly start using that a lot more than they're going to use legacy based search, right?
Hmm.
Because it's just a better experience.
Yeah.
You get your answer instead of a bunch of blue links. Blue links are going to die. There's no future in blue links. I mean, that's also like as obvious as the day is long. And so what's going to happen is the next big drop that we're going to see in terms of mass adoption is you and I are going to have an agent, and that agent does our research for us. And we say to the agent, all right, I want you to go find, we need a new roof. I want you to go find the best roofers near us, and I want you to come back with a recommendation. And then instead of vetting like 3 or 4 or 5 roofing companies, it vets the 47 local companies. It reads every single review they've ever produced. It goes on their website, essentially checks out every page and any interactive tool on that site, it does. And it expects to find some type of interactive estimator tool. It will, trust me. That's how it's going to
Hmm.
work. And then
Hmm.
it comes back to the homeowner and says, here's who I'm going to recommend, just like Google did.
Yep.
Here's who I'm going to recommend. Here's why I'm recommending them based on these factors. We call those, by the way, trust signals. And so here's the company, 1 or 2 that I'm going to recommend. What would you like me to do next? I'll set the appointment if you would like. And then beyond that, eventually it says, I'll get the quote if you would like. And they just go directly to the agent that's running the shop for the roofing company that
Hmm.
communicates with the agents for the homeowner. And then they have this beautiful conversation and a negotiation is had, which sounds completely like weird, right? It's just like, there's no way. I swear headed. And within 18 months, I think we're going to have mass adoption for people searching with an agent because it's going to be that easy. And to a degree, we're already starting to do this.
Yeah.
So when that happens, you're going to be forced to have answers that you weren't forced to have before because otherwise you're going to be in big trouble. Furthermore, what we're seeing is tools like ChatGPT are starting to penalize companies that don't discuss the things that buyers want the most. One of which is pricing information. So this is why, take a tool like Price Guide, we've had started to explode. And we've started to explode really with franchising companies because if you look at the home improvement space alone, number one complaint I'm seeing with these franchisors is they're saying generating leads is harder. That's number one. Number two, traffic is down. Number three, we're spending more on Google and Facebook ads than we've spent on the past. We're seeing less results. Okay, so say this is the trend that you're seeing across the board, not just home improvement, home services. You're seeing with
Hmm.
all types
Yeah.
of franchisors.
Right.
So you have a lead problem fundamentally, and people are slower to give their information and fill out forms today than they were in the past. That download our ebook just ain't working anymore. Certainly not to the scale that it was working 10 years ago, not even close. So
Right.
you have to give more to get those same results. And what do you have to give? Well, you have to give better experiences slash answers through interactivity. Self-service tools is what we call them. And one of the primary self-service tools would be a self-pricing tool like an estimator. So that's
Hmm.
why I built Price Guide because I could see where all this was going. And you take a tool like Price Guide, we've got right now over 1,000 contractors alone that are using the tool. And what we've seen is when somebody adds a pricing estimator to their website, you're not giving an exact price, by the way. It's not a quote tool. It's an
Sure.
estimator tool.
Yeah.
And people hear this and they misconstrue it because they're having a civil war in their own minds. It's like, no, don't misconstrue this. What we're saying is that it's your duty to address the fundamental question, can I afford this? Roughly, how much is this going to cost? That's the fundamental question people have.
Yeah.
And so when you do that and you give them a range, you see a X immediate. The second you add it, a 3X increase in organic leads to the website.
Hmm.
And you see a X to 4X increase in conversions for paid ads. So just think about that for a second. If you could spend $5,000 a month right now on Google, but you're getting the results that are 4X greater than you were getting the day before, why would you not do that? And the
Hmm.
problem is you have companies that say, well, we can't do that because we're a customized solution, or dealer network is going to push back, or franchisees won't like that. It's like you're going about this all wrong because, first of all, it's like the cart is is leading the horse. And you've got that's not how you run a franchise, by the way. That's just
Yeah.
not how you do it. There's
Yes.
certain times as a franchisor, you have to, and I've lived this, right? That you have to just say, this is the way we're going to do it. I was the first, like I said, franchise slash manufacturer of fiberglass pools that had a pricing estimator on our website. Everybody
Hmm.
said it was impossible. Our own dealer said, well, we got various pricing. So we turn it on and we say, we're going to make this a nice range so that it works for at least 95% of the time. It's pretty accurate. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And what we see is everybody says this is by far the core of our entire marketing strategy and our lead flow. And no franchisee has ever said, stop sending me the leads. Not a one. Not a one has ever said, no, we don't want those leads and it's not helping us. Not a single one.
Mhm.
And now with, like I said, over 1,000 contractors using the tool, I've never had a single one say to me, wow, this doesn't help our business. It doesn't improve it. That's why the churn rate is below 1%, which is crazy for SaaS.
Right.
Churn rate below 1%. And the only time it doesn't work is for companies that it wasn't a good fit for in the first place, right? Which would be like if you're a B2B hospital, construction company and you're doing projects that are $1 billion, yeah, it's just not a good fit for you. No, you don't need an estimator for that,
Yeah.
right? But for the
Well, you need a
99% of other
yeah,
businesses, you're going to need it.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wish I'd actually spoken to you, 2 weeks ago, because that's when I started. Yeah, we bought 100-and-some-year-old house that we moved into last August. And now that of course, we realized that in August it was pretty warm in the lower level, and realized that there was no air conditioning in the lower level. And we were like, okay, so come spring of 2026, we need to get some split units into the lower level so that people can actually be down there. And of course, I did it the old school way. Well, the first thing I did was I contacted the air conditioning company, the HVAC company that actually did the sort of the repairs and stuff in the house before we moved in,
Yep.
because I figured they know where everything is. And then, to your point, like going into it, I thought, okay, this is probably going to be like a $10,000 thing, right? But I had no way of really knowing. I mean, I should have maybe done some research and used the estimator on Google if I'd known it was there. But when the quote came back at 13,000, I'm like, oh, maybe I need to get another quote. So now, of course, then I had to take time to go and call. So I went to Google, did the whole near me thing, HVAC contractors near
Yep.
me, took the ones with the highest reviews, etc. And now I ended up with 3 quotes that are actually all the same. But now I've wasted 10 days and a
Waste
lot
of
of my
time.
time.
And that's not your future. What you just described is not the, CX, UX of the future. This is not where we're going to be doing, which by the
Clearly.
way, the smart HVAC company on their site and within their campaigns, what they've got is they've got an assessment tool that essentially gives you a grade on where you are when it comes to your home's heating and cooling systems. B,
Hmm.
they've got recommendation tools on what you would need. So, for
Right.
example, in your case, you had to decide, should I get a split unit? Should I get a heat pump? There's like all these different
Yeah.
types of options that you would actually have for that. And so a smart HVAC company on their site would say, hey, have a tool that says, hey, what is the best heating solution for my needs? And
Yeah.
then you, it would ask you a series of questions. You would give it answers to like, hey, we've got a older house, it's this many stories, and here's the problems that we're having. And through
Mhm.
the interaction, it says, okay, Brendan, based on what you just described, we're going to recommend this route, split unit.
Yeah.
Here's the split unit itself that we're going to recommend. Here's
Mhm.
why we're recommending that to you.
Mhm.
Now, what happens is the homeowner calls up the HVAC company and says, hey, I already know what I need. It's that HV1000 unit that you recommended to me on the site. Even better is if the tool would have said, and here's your general price ranges for the different sizes. Installation, of course, is going to give you a more of a range.
Mhm.
We got to see what happens when we come out, but here's the range that you're probably going to be in. That homeowner is freaking thrilled.
Yeah.
They are so enlightened, and the chance that they go with that company is dramatically higher because they are willing to give more. What's mind blowing, what I just described, every single one of your listeners, every single one of them says, yeah, that's a better UX. And yet, at least 80% of the people listening to this right now are justifying in their mind reasons as to why they cannot offer that type of UX. Are
As a business
you
owner. Yeah.
kidding me? That's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's correct. Sad.
Yeah. Which I think, I mean, as you were sort of talking about that, I mean, it comes back to, what you and I were talking about earlier in the green room, which was it comes down to leadership, right? It's not about the tools or whatever that's going to solve all the business problems. And in this case, if you have a bunch of franchisees who are saying we're not getting enough leads, we're not hitting our goals, what can we do? Instead of just saying, well, just do more of what you were doing last year, let's take a
Here's the
step
thing.
back,
This is what I've learned is absolutely true about being a very successful franchisor or let's say manufacturing, you have dealers or whatever
Yeah,
whatever it
sort of
is. And that is
multi-location
this.
businesses. Yeah, yeah.
If you are not pissing off your dealership base, your franchisees, if you're not annoying them, if you're not frustrating them at times, well, then you're not innovating like you should.
Hmm.
Full stop.
Yeah,
Full stop. Do you know how many times McDonald's has completely frustrated and annoyed their people with new campaigns? You know, it's like, hey, you all now have to revamp your stores. We're going to give you this much time. I know you don't probably want to do it because it's going to cost you money, but this is where the brand is headed. Hey, we're going to have McCafe now. We're going to go directly against Starbucks. Every single time a percentage complains, a
yeah,
percentage of the franchisees say, this is not the way that I want to do it because you got a group that's resistant to change.
sure.
But if the world is going in a direction, your job is to make sure you're skating where the puck is. Excuse me,
Hmm.
where the puck is going to be, not where the
Yeah,
puck is.
yeah,
Everybody else is where the puck is. You have to go where the puck is going to be, right? And
yeah.
so it's obvious. It's obvious. If I said to you, let's just look at home improvement. We already see that a litany, like more and more home improvement companies every single day are having some type of pricing estimator on their website. So
Hmm.
is this trend going to reverse? Is it going to go backwards? Are we suddenly going to see people saying, I don't want to get a better sense for pricing before I reach out to the company? Not going to happen. So therefore, if I said to you, based on that, is it likely that every home improvement company eventually is forced to have a pricing estimator based on the market and market conditions, expectations? Oh, and by the way, agents too, which is going to be the biggest force multiplier. Is that going to happen? Yeah, it's going to happen. If you have to even think about that, you're not being intellectually honest with yourself. There are certain debates that you should have, right? And I agree, like, is Facebook Meta going to exist in 10 years? I have no idea. I don't know if it's going to exist in 10 years. So I don't know. But I do know for certain there will be some type of social media in 10 years. You know what I'm saying? Our dependency on AI is only going to grow. It's like the same thing as like the blue link is going to die. That's not our future, clicking on blue links. The future is getting immediate answers and
Hmm.
having the AI take immediate action and removing friction, removing fear. Like that's absolutely where we're headed. I'm sure of it. And so if
Yeah,
it's aligned with that, you can safely predict that's where we're going to head.
yeah. It kind of, I feel like I've said this too many times on the show, but I'll say it again. It's like, if you go back to some early examples, when we moved from the Stone Age to the Iron Age, it wasn't because we ran out of stones, right?
That's
Um,
correct.
it was just there was a better way to do it, and there was no going back.
That's
So,
That's correct. And it is quite stunning right now just how behind I see a lot of these, manufacturers, franchisors, etc. When I see a franchisor saying, "I'm just not sure how my franchisees are going to take this." I'm like, "What? That's your litmus test?" Because the litmus test should be, I know this is what we need to do. Now I need to figure out how to get the buy-in as quickly as possible.
right. And
So
there
you
was
got to live in the solution versus like,
yeah,
well, I'm not sure how they're going to take this. It's like, yeah, I'm sure how they're going to take it. A percentage are going to say they like it. A percentage is going to push back, and then you're going to have a bunch in between. Full
sure.
stop. That's how it's
Yeah.
going to work with every major change or innovation or push that you have.
Yeah, and I think so when we were at IFA in February, one of the things I was asking a lot of people about was so there's a flooring franchise who is becoming sort of famous or notorious, whichever way you want to look at it, because they know that in order to have the standard that they want to be at, they need to raise the level of all their franchisees. To your point, right? So if there are certain franchisees who are struggling for whatever reason, they need to help them sort of get out of the franchise because as long as you have one or two weak franchises, they're dragging down the entire brand. And when I asked some other franchise leaders about that, they were like, "Oh, yeah, but that's I'm like, dude, it's like that's the only way. I mean, if you really believe that you want a growing, scaling franchise brand that just gets better and better and better with every franchisee that you add, and then at the same time get rid of franchisees who just for some reason weren't a good fit and it wasn't working,
Well, it's
then
so different than if you're a boss and you've got a bunch of highly underperforming team members that you work with them, and if it becomes very clear that they're just not going to ever become the type of performer that they need to be, well, then both sides are being hurt by holding on. too long. But the issue with the franchise is this: when you have a franchisee that really messes up, everybody loses then
Sure.
because it hurts the brand for everybody. And that's the issue is you're now allowing an entity to affect the financial peace and wellness of all these other companies that have nothing to do with them other than the fact that they share a brand.
Right.
And that's the thing. You got to protect the brand, protect the culture, protect the perception in the marketplace. These are the things that you have to do. And you should be raising the standard all the time. If you're not raising the standard all the time, you're not trending in the right direction. And I find that the more stringent you get, actually, the better, of course, works like this law of attraction. You just the better type of franchisees you end up attracting anyway.
Yeah, I mean, this is it. It's like it ultimately comes down to strategic leadership, right? So if you're, and to your point, say franchises hit ceilings like any other business hits ceilings, whether it's a revenue ceiling or a team size ceiling. I know I shared with you the rule of threes and tens that the recruiting CEO essentially made known, which is the things that break when you're growing. And again, and this is what I always have to qualify this by saying, if you don't want to grow, then don't worry about any of this stuff. Although, like some of the stuff that you're talking about is not only are you not going to grow, you're going to start going backwards. That's a different conversation. But we're typically talking about, with franchise brands who are looking to scale, how do they get from 50 to 100, or from 100 to 300 units, or 300 units to 1,000 units? And the first thing that they have to accept is that things will change. If you're growing, things are going to change, things are going to break. And you need to know what things are going to break. And it all starts with leadership, which is, what are we going to do when this thing breaks? And just knowing that it's going to happen so that you're ready for when it happens, and you just have to make the decision. And I think it's all comes back to what we're saying now. So you have those, whether it's, do we put estimators in for all our franchisees? That's a strategic decision. Why wouldn't we do that? Or is it
Yeah,
just a
and
timing
let me give
issue?
you an
Yeah.
example of difference. I talked to two large private equity owned home improvement companies in the same week. One of them heard the pitch and they said immediately, "We're crazy if we don't do this, and it's so inexpensive. I let's just do it. Let's pay for it, and let's just roll that in to essentially their franchisee fees to cover this. We'll drop something else, but it's not crazy expensive. But let's just do this." So that
Mhm.
was the response: is, "Hey, we're gonna essentially make sure every franchisee has this." By the way, these are same industries here. Okay,
Mhm.
same industries. The next response is, "Yeah, I'm not sure if we're gonna be able to get buy-in for this. And, honestly, I'm not sure how to cover the cost. Here was the cost. It was $25 a month per franchisee. That was
Wow.
the cost. So we're talking dirt cheap, like you can find that type of change in your couch situation, your couch
Mhm.
pillows. Okay, but that was the mentality of two private equity owned home improvement, uh, uh, you
Franchise
know,
brands. Yeah.
brands that have multiple brands within their ecosystem, and that was the difference in leadership.
Mhm.
Stunning, stunning.
Yeah. I mean, and we see this all the time, where, a leadership group comes to us and says, "Yeah, we want you to set up the HubSpot CRM and integrate it with all the other tools that we use." And we really have to make sure that they're making the right decision, not choosing the right platform, but make sure that they don't think that this by putting in a new CRM to replace the one that's broken because they've gone from 100 units to 300 units. We need to make sure that they don't believe that's going to solve problems that it won't solve, right? Which are typically leadership issues, or they don't have enough people at strategic levels within the franchise, or they haven't accepted that certain processes need to change because you have to add another layer of management and leadership so to support your growing number of franchisees.
Mhm.
That all has to be mapped out and agreed first before we can then put that into the CRM so that it works for the franchisees and the franchise brand. Yeah, it all seems that so simple, right?
Well, I just think, leaders get paid to lead. And if you're not leading, there is a problem. We're seeing change at a greater rate. I've been a business owner now since 2001, exactly 25 years.
Hmm.
When I got out of college, boom, immediately I hit the circuit. And I can tell you right now, I've never seen change like this. I've never seen the speed of change like this. And sunk cost fallacy is killing a lot of companies. It's killing a lot of brands. What is sunk cost fallacy,
Yeah.
right? It's like, hey, we've been doing this thing this long, we've been investing in it this long, so let's just keep doing it. We can't change. This is
Mhm.
why people sometimes stay in relationships longer than they should. And this is why franchises sometimes continue to do things the way it's always been done, even though it's being bypassed. Case in point, if you're doing SEO, search engine optimization, today, like you were doing it 5 years ago, you're on drugs. There's something seriously wrong with you. If you're doing any marketing today exactly like you were doing it 5 years ago, there's something seriously wrong with you. If you're
Mhm.
not selling differently today and your sales system hasn't evolved today from what it was 5 years ago, there's something seriously wrong with you. What's wrong with you is you're not leading anymore. You've gotten complacent. Pride cycle has really caught up to you. Maybe you're fat and happy. Maybe you're still the market leader, but eventually, remember this, it's the rule breakers that always end up becoming the rule makers, and everybody else ends up becoming the rule followers.
Mhm.
And if you're not breaking rules consistently in your space, even rules that you originally defined, then you will be the one being replaced.
Yeah.
But most companies, again, because of that pride cycle, the leadership team becomes too in love with their IP, with the ways of the past, with what has always worked before. And that's when you see them get into serious trouble. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now with companies that refuse to lean into AI, with companies that refuse to lean into how the modern buyer is changing, with companies that are saying, oh, I'm not willing to show this thing, even though I know the buyer wants it. I'm not willing to say this thing, even though that's what the buyer would want. And I would want it if I was in that situation. Like, no, you can't think like that and think that you're going to remain in front of the pack.
Yeah. So, Marcus, unfortunately, these things always are too short. But as we start to wrap up here, so as AI reshapes, search and buyer behavior, how does this philosophy evolve without losing trust?
Well, to me, it just goes back to the golden rule. So, for example, can and should you use AI to help you produce content? Yeah, absolutely you should. But if the content doesn't sound like you, if I could read it and it doesn't match the person or the brand or the salesperson that I'm going to be meeting with and having a conversation with, then we have a problem. We have a
Hmm.
problem. So, if you're reading any of my stuff, it should sound like you read it and then you meet me in person. You're like, dude, you're exactly as I thought you would be. You sound just like you write. That's to me is what matters. And by the way, too often we think that if we're embracing AI and the technology, that we're not increasing the human element of our business and of our brand. And I don't think that's the case at all. Like, let me give you just a really simple example. It is easier than it's ever been to send one-to-one videos in place of text-based email. Every salesperson should be doing it before they go on a sales call. They should
Hmm.
send to the prospect a one-to-one video introducing themselves so the prospect can see their face, hear their voice, and know who they're going to be speaking with, either by phone or by conference call or in person, right?
Hmm.
What percentage of salespeople from the teams that are listening to this right now are sending one-to-one video as a standard before a sales appointment? I can tell you this right now, it's less than 3%. I know the numbers. It's
Hmm.
less than 3%, which is inexcusable because we've been sending email the exact same way since 1997. Think about that, 1997. So for about 30 years, we've been sending text-based email almost exactly the same way. And yet
Yeah.
we say technology is the problem. No, technology gave you the ability to send them a very personal video beforehand, and yet you're choosing to continue to be text-based because this is laziness and lack of leadership, if we
Mm.
call it for what it is.
Yeah. Well, and it's again, it's a perfect example of your, the golden rule. It's like, how has your experience improved when one of the 50 salespeople that you've dealt with in the last X number of months has sent you a personalized video ahead of the actual meeting? How has that improved? Has that improved your experience in the actual meeting? Everyone's going to say, yeah,
Of
absolutely, yes.
course.
So then why aren't you doing it yourself? Yeah. Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Um,
And this is again
yeah.
one of those things where that should be a standard. That should be a standard of the brand. It's like, hey, this is just what we do.
Right.
And once again, if you have a franchise, you have to have standards. The whole thing is built on standards. And it
Hmm.
shouldn't just be standards for your product or your service. It's the process by which you sell, the process by which you market. Those you should have that same focus on standards in those areas as well.
Yeah. And the standards, I guess what you're saying is they shouldn't seem like they're cast in stone as far as like we set the standard 15 years ago and we should just keep doing things the same way. The standards is guiding you as more of a principled thing. Like this is the standard because of these. This is what it does for us as a brand. So let's make sure we keep doing things, and if they as they evolve,
That's right.
come back to the standard or update the standard so that there's no confusion.
That's right. We evolve with the times. That being said, there's absolutely times when standards should not be optional. The
Yes.
Chick-fil-A is going to be red. It's not going to be purple, even though that's your family's favorite color. It's the same
Yeah.
thing in terms of there's going to be times when you say, this is how we are going to do it. Just, another thing is like, we do a lot of sales training. Brand recently was like, yeah, we just don't want to record our sales calls. So you're telling me you don't want to have better data than you've ever had in the history of the world on what your sales team is and is not doing right. You don't want to know every one of the members that is asking world-class questions versus bad questions. You don't want to know any of these things. It's like, are you kidding me? That to me is like, I just can't even start to understand it because it's so obvious. And we could go on this, but I think the core theme is we have to lead right now. The world's thirsty for great leaders,
Yeah.
leaders that are not afraid of the future, leaders that are not afraid of leaning in and of saying, hey, we don't have it all figured out, but we do know that the buyer's changing, the market's changing, the world's changing. And we're going to be willing to evolve with it. And we're going to make sure you, dear franchisees, are in tune with what those changes need to be.
Yeah. So Marcus, the training, the sales training you were alluding to there, that's the work that you're doing through Question First, right?
Yeah, yeah. I've got a company called QuestionFirstGroup, and it's a phenomenal company in terms of sales and leadership training. We have a whole system of communication that we teach. It's very, very powerful,
Hmm.
and we do it with different franchisees, franchisors. The problem is what we see is one area where significantly a lot of franchisees deviate is the way they sell, and so you see extreme variations on
Hmm.
sales like styles in processes and
Yeah.
questions they ask and all this stuff. And just don't. There's
Especially
not
in
really
like
good standards for
especially in that
selling.
sort of home services and home improvement
Oh yeah,
space where it's a lot
yeah.
of it is happening offline. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all over. It's all over the place,
Yeah.
and so this is one of the problems that we're fixing. We're having a lot of success with it, but it starts with having a system. So we invented a system of communication for selling and leadership, similar to what EOS is to solving problems. We created that. I created that. It's called the Pathfinder system. It's magical. You
Mhm.
can learn more about it at Question First Group. We got a bunch of
Yeah, we'll put a link to
free
that in
books
the
and stuff on there.
we'll put a link to that in the show notes.
Yeah.
So to wrap up, Marcus, so the work that you're doing at Question First Group, price guide, and AI trust signals, as you sort of leave the audience with sort of last piece of advice, like what else are you excited about, and do you think other people should be excited about, and what can people actually do in the next week that can make a big impact on their business?
Well, I think it's never been easier to stand out and create trust despite what you hear. You can be this incredible multiplier of talent and productivity today because of AI. You just got to get in the sandbox, though. You got to be, as a leader, you can't be counting on your team to teach you about AI. You've
Mhm.
got to get in the dang sandbox. And you should be a builder at this point. You should be building apps. If you haven't built apps yourself as a leader of your company, I'm the most non technical person I know. I mean, I don't know a lick of code. I'm building apps all the time now,
Mhm.
and that's what you can and should do. But if I was you, I'd go to AI today, and I would say, I've never built anything. Help me build something. Help me build a tool. Ask me any question you need to ask me. Let's get this party started, and then just let the magic happen. That's all you have to do. I'd build it on Claude. That's the tool that I'm going to recommend to you today. Could be a different one in 3 months, but that's one I'm going to
Yeah.
recommend to you today. But that's where you need to be building.
Yeah. Awesome. Marcus, thank you so much for joining me today. It was awesome to catch up.
My pleasure, my friend. You take care.
You too.